hi, welcome to Lisa-Sian Eagles, HR professional, L&D expert, well-being coach, qualified, expert in so many different realms. Welcome to this little podcast. Delighted to have you on board. And like I say, your experience working with a large logistics company is going to be invaluable, I think, in terms of this topic, which today we're just talking about the art of coaching for performance improvement. How do you perform, or how do you create high-performing teams through coaching? So welcome, Lisa. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. You make me sound so good. You just need to follow me around and just, if that could be my introduction just in life, that would be brilliant.
It's well deserved. It's well known. Like I say, we've worked together for a number of years, so I know you're such an expert on a number of different fields. But as I say, just really wanted to pick your brains today on this subject of coaching for success. And I know we've both worked in organisations and with each other to help individuals and also teams kind of look at improving the performance, the productivity and effectiveness. So I just wanted to talk about your experiences and advice really. How do leaders and managers and organizations achieve success for their teams through coaching?
Oh gosh, lots to unpick there, Lee. Many questions asked. I hope I cover it all, but I've had so many experiences both being an employee and an employer of teams. And I think we can overcomplicate it sometimes. I think that we all get wrapped up with the do's and the don'ts, and this is what works, this is what doesn't work. And I think for me, I just try and keep it to some really core principles, and we can talk about a few of them today. But I don't want leaders to listen to this and think, right, this is exactly how to do it, because I certainly do what's right for me and not, what the rule book says. I'm a bit of a rule breaker in that way. But I just find that my key principle is kindness and empathy. And I know that sounds really fluffy, and the well-being side of me will kind of lean on that. But I find if leaders can start with those principles and build on technique from them, I think they're in a really good place to start.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'd echo that. I think there is a danger that sometimes managers, leaders think there's a one-fit-all kind of concept, and it's not. As we know, people are different. There's so much diversity. Teams are different. Organizations, cultures is different. So that flexibility, that adaptability is crucial, really, to kind of get across that right level of engagement.
Absolutely. So I always use the principle in sort of mental health and well-being. What makes me feel well at work isn't what would make you feel well. And it's about leaders understanding what those core principles and morals are within their teams and capitalize on those specialisms. If I reflect back on an experience I had of managing quite a small team, sort of 6-ish years ago now, I was a deputy manager in that team and became the manager just sort of before COVID. The team was highly dysfunctional, really disengaged, working in silos. I was a part of that team, quite new, and was given the manager's role as the youngest person in the team. And I remember thinking at the time, how am I going to turn this around? I was worried that I was going to have sort of a little bit of disrespect because I was the youngest person, hadn't been in the business very long, I knew the least. Were the team going to accept me as their new leader? Were they going to see my merit, see my worth? And of course, an imposter syndrome just crept right in. But I reflected on my good leaders from my past, from people who I've been managed by, and every single one had the exact same principle. They were kind, they were caring, they advocated for me, they were clear, they were consistent. I knew that they would have my back. I felt safe with them. I felt psychologically safe. I could make mistakes and they would say, Lisa, it's okay. What we're going to do now. And every single leader I had did that. And at the time, the good leaders in my life were all men. And the leaders in my life that were relatively poor, unfortunately, have been women. So I sort of lent on that and was like, well, I can't make that mistake. I can't be this female that goes into these environments and does it wrong, because I felt like I had a bit of a point to prove. I didn't want to be the youngest female and just get that kind of stereotype. So I led on what I knew. I looked at my history and I just went into that team friendly, myself, most importantly. I was authentic. I told them my vulnerabilities. I built a trusting bond with them. I gave them everything that I possibly could about me, and it allowed them to open up back, and I understood, nuances, and I had two of the team that were neurodivergent, so I learned quite quickly how differently they would need to be approached in a leadership style. I had team members who were nearing 60, but I had also a fabulous Gen Zer who was just fresh out of the box and had never experienced another workplace before. And across this range of every single different person I could come across in this team, I had it. And it was we were about to go into COVID, and the team they weren't talking, they weren't communicating together. I had to send them out into the world to carry on working during COVID, and hope that they were going to perform and succeed and kind of highlight us as a really good team. And we did. We just built those foundations. We built the trust. We built friendships. And I know that's quite a controversial thing to say, that, you'll hear a lot of leaders say, I don't come to work to make friends, or I've got a directive to do, and that's all I'm going to focus on. And we find that process leaders who focus on the facts, the figures, the statistics, the end profits and things like that aren't always the most empathetic leaders. And that's not me saying that that's the rule, but that's a bit of a generalization from my experience.
But I think you're spot on there. I think that before you go into any kind of structure or solution mode, as many managers and leaders would do when they're presented with a problem, individual or team, it is a case of stepping back and as you've already pointed out, just kind of thinking about, what's my mindset? How am I about to approach this? And what am I presenting to the team about myself? And that vulnerability that you spoke about, that kind of almost verging on humility to your team, that you're not kind of setting yourself up on a golden pedestal to be the guru as the leader. It's that ability to say, well, I'm human, I make mistakes, and I'm vulnerable as well. And that, as you say, develops so much trust in teams and relationships that puts you on a firm foundation then to move forward and look at developing your team, the relationships, etc. So I think that's really important to call that out first of all, to kind of think about your credibility within the team's eyes. For any coach, for any kind of leader manager, you've got to have that credibility with your coachee or your team, because otherwise, no matter what process you follow, what structure, it's just not going to land right, is it?
No, it absolutely won't. And I, at that point, didn't have any formal coaching experience, didn't know any of the sort of the deeper, darker tools in my toolbox to kind of go off. So I was just sort of leading with what I knew felt right and what felt authentic. And I'm quite a curious person by nature. I think we've had this conversation many times before. I prefer a question over anything else. And those questions aren't just, work questions, they're personal questions, they're people questions. And it allows that space for curiosity in other people. And the team then would ask questions in anticipation for things that I was going to say. And we were just a really curious bunch by the end of the 5 years of me sort of managing or being involved in that team. Everyone kind of knew what was coming, and we understood each other. We'd got through that core forming stage of having relationships and setting a platform really for success. And then as I sort of grew into the role and moved on in my role as well, then I learned sort of the art of being able to coach people that you haven't got those fundamental relationships, that you don't have a year to kind of get to know each other and do all of that. You've got to be able to ask the right questions at the right time to get a result. And I've worked with other leaders in organizations and other leaders within my organization, and allowing them to be more curious in their approach with their teams and allow them to ask questions and sit back and listen is probably another really core element of being a great leader of a team. If you are so wrapped up in what you're doing and not opening yourself up to understanding what the team needs are and what they're trying to achieve, and you're all working in silo, then it's not really going to work. You're not putting your best foot forward.
Do you think that team members are always receptive to that kind of approach, or do some people just want to be told what to do?
Yeah, They do. They do want to be have a more directive approach, and I felt that experience from working with many ex-civil servants. They are very well. I'll get told what to do. I won't use my own initiative. I won't be creative because I'm not paid to be creative. I'm not paid to come up with the ideas and the solutions. And I've come across that many a time. But once you've spoken to them a little bit more and you've maybe given them the feeling that they are the SME, they are the experts in that environment, you give them that feeling of a little bit of love. It does take a little bit of praise and encouragement and finding a workaround with what makes them tick. Everyone likes praise. It's just how they like to receive it. It's very different. You have to understand that nuance in those characters. Is it public praise? Is it written praise? Is it something that it's every day or every week? You will find that out naturally about people. But some people will want to just do the job. But if you give them a little bit of space and just say, well, what's your idea in that? Because this is going to benefit you. How would this best suit you? What would you do if you were in my position? What would you do if you were the big boss? And they like a little bit of that sometimes. And it works. It's just finding what works for that person.
Yeah, and I think more and more workforces are kind of finding that, and I often see some of the clients that we work with now talking about the leader being the coach with their team. And as we've talked about before, historically, leadership styles used to be very much kind of dictatorial, I'm the boss, just do as I say kind of thing, and putting the leader as the expert within the team. And for some leaders who have been promoted into their roles because of their technical experience, that's what they've relied on, and just kind of dictate the team's performance based on their previous technical experience. But unfortunately, that's not enough these days. As you quite rightly say, you have to engage with your people. You have to show a whole heap of different traits, from empathy, listening, understanding. We often talk about the leader being so many different roles, from policeman, teacher, parent, etc. these days. So coaching as a leader to get performance from your team, I think you're right. I think there is a need not to assume that you've got all the answers for that performance improvement as the leader. You have to engage with your team members, and as you're alluding to, just ask them questions, ask them for their input and their guidance, and almost facilitate them rather than kind of tell them how to kind of perform. So how would you suggest leaders go about doing that? Because as I say, it seems to be more and more common now that leaders are expected to coach their people. Is there a process that they should look at?
I think they should start with the initial principles of coaching, understand why it works, evidence-based. If they're process leaders, they're going to love a bit of evidence. Put that behind it. That's the way you reach that audience. And I do think that we have to give them space. And I think as more senior leaders, leading leaders, we need to understand that this is a practice approach. They need to be able to take time to master the art of asking the question first before giving the answer or going into solution mode. And I think that's a bit that organisations are really missing at the minute. I think that they're so statutory focused, they're so profit focused that organisations are just 100 miles an hour all the time, that they're not really thinking about that space for development. And I think being in a learning and development space, it's all about those skills that are going to make more money for people and make them safe. But we're not thinking about that psychological safety. That's an area that we're absolutely missing. And leaders need to learn to take that step back, put trust in their team, so that the team are the ones that are the experts. They're the ones that are living and breathing and doing the work every day. They're the ones that have got the golden nuggets that are going to make things better for them, make it better for the processes, make it better for the business. And you've got to tap into that. But that takes time, and leaders need that time. I feel like the trusting environment that the leader creates, if they're not naturally curious and if they're not naturally empathetic, and they are missing those skills we'd like to see as a rounded leader, they need to be able to find this trusted space so that the colleague can then approach them with the suggestion. Even if they haven't asked the question, the colleague could say, listen, Tim, I've had an idea about how we can move the shop floor around to get a quicker process. But if that trust and that psychological safety about putting their head up isn't there, that's not going to happen. So
yeah, totally.
without being a coach, you don't have to be the world's best coach and ask the world's best question at the best time. If that space is around you, it's naturally going to happen. You're going to have people that are flourishing, developing, being curious, open-minded. Motivation, wow, I could talk about motivation all day, because we're seeing leaders that are those process leaders that head down, head at the computer, love getting involved in an Excel spreadsheet, love a system, love a database. Are they going to be naturally the most energetic, the most vibrant, motivational speaker at that team brief or that leader's brief in the morning to say, like, team, we've got this, you've got this, let's have a great day? It's the motivation in a team goes a long way. You can't ask a team to be motivated if you yourself aren't motivated.
It's the energy you bring, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's natural to some people, and those things can't be taught, to the nth degree. They can be given guidance to say, well, this is how a team might feel motivated, and you do it how you would like to motivate. But ultimately, if somebody is that behind the screen manager, they're not going to have that. And working in wellbeing as well, we see it a lot where disengagement happens really quickly. And a lot of the root causes are, God, it sounds like I'm bashing managers, but I'm not. A lot of the root causes are the managers. There's a responsibility to look after that well-being of that team, to ensure that that team are okay. And we've got to forget about this in work, out of work. They're people. We don't care whether it's an out of work problem, in a work problem. Sorry, go on. I feel like we've got a good question.
No. I was interrupting you there, but I think you're absolutely spot on, because again, I question how many managers in roles have been given the support, the training, the insight to recognise the kind of process that they need to implement to get the best out of their people. Now, you mentioned a minute ago about referring to the coaching processes. Some managers won't know what those coaching processes are or what the structure is, and I think fundamentally it's about, from a manager's point of view, understanding. And we'll talk a little bit later on about some of the frameworks, but understanding where do you want people to be? What's the future state? What's the vision? How do you want them to perform, either as individuals or ultimately as a team? And communicating that, sharing that. And yes, relationships are important, as you've said, for people to buy into what you're saying or directing them to. But once you've kind of outlined that vision, I guess it's then about doing some gap analysis in terms of where are your people currently against that future state, and what are the gaps, and what do you then subsequently need to do about those gaps? Yep. So again, just kind of curious about your experience of that. And you talked earlier about your team. Was there a process of that kind of setting out to your team that, we're here now, this is where we need to be, and there's a gap in terms of what we need to do differently or train or skill or be aware of to get to that future state? How did you kind of deal with that? Calling all HR professionals, leaders and managers. Are you ready to take your workplace strategy to the next level? At 2Js, we get it. Managing people, driving engagement, and keeping up with ever-changing HR challenges isn't easy. But what if you had instant access to expert-led training, ready-to-use HR toolkits, and practical resources, all designed to make your job easier? From leadership development to conflict resolution, employee engagement to resilience training, we've got the solutions you need when you need them. And here's something just for you. Use discount code podcast25 at the checkout for 25% off all purchases at 2J's HR store. No more wasting time on outdated processes. Visit 2jshrstore.com today and claim your exclusive discount. Because great HR isn't just about policies, it's about people.
It was, the team itself had no targets. They had no annual place that they were supposed to be. It was quite a loose directive from senior leadership. It was make sure there's training in place to keep everybody safe. And we didn't know whether we were doing well. We didn't know what the targets were going to be. So that was ultimately quite a difficult hurdle to come across, because I was questioning my leaders and saying, well, what do you want from this team? Do you want them to just be a health and safety trainer, or do you want them to be developing people? Do you want them to be looking at people as individuals and setting development pathways and goals and sending them through the business and giving them, like you say, the tools to be the next leaders? So we always start with training. I think it's a really great place to start. And we've worked a lot together in training individuals, team leaders, line managers, and giving them the tools to then go away and implement. I think where many businesses fail is that they think that training is the be all and end all. And I think that they think that once you've got somebody trained, that's it. They're going to know what to do. They're going to know where they're going. You're going to have told them how to create a smart goal for themselves, and off into the world you go. And it doesn't work like that. Often training can be a huge waste of resource, a huge waste of money, but it's more of a tick box from the organisation to say we've done it. And a lot of then the ownership is on then the employee. A lot of the ownership is then, well, you've been given the tool. I've done my bit, go off and do it. But then the organisation isn't backing that up with the accountability and making sure that goals are smart, and making sure that it does then link to the organisational goals, the team goals that you're alluding to. It's about that bigger picture. It's not just about that one element to somebody's coaching journey or training journey. You have to see it through to the end for it to be really effective. With my team at the time, that we didn't have any direction, we had no goal. We got some loose goals in the end, and really the goals for me on a personal level was to make sure that everyone felt valued and everyone felt that they had a contribution and could contribute. What we found certainly after kind of COVID and everyone kind of came back into the office and we were all back as a visible team, because we'd worked so well together and the communication was so strong, I'd set a psychologically safe environment for people. They created their own targets. They'd come to me and say,
"Oh, wow."
Lisa, I really want to do this next year. They found the gap. They said, well, nobody's looking after. It was amazing. You know, my wonderful Gen Zedder, who we both love. She came to me. She's like, "There's a massive gap here. There's a huge gap. The team leaders are based on our evidence that I've found, our team leaders are the pinnacle of the message that comes across, the communications from the shop floor to the leadership team. They're our pinch point. They're our bottleneck. Let's make sure we reach them."
So they started being proactive themselves in coming up with the objectives. Wow.
I mean, I felt like I'd ran a marathon. I was like, wow, I've got to the finish line, then over to you guys. And it was then a case of nurturing that environment. I had pretty much nothing to do because, as I mentioned earlier, they knew what was coming. They knew what question I was going to ask. They knew that that was a preemptive thing for them. So they were like, well, I've come up with the solution, Lisa. I've asked that question in my head. I know what that's going to mean to me, to the team and to the business. And if they could answer all of those things and say that it was a worthwhile activity to do, I'd be the first cheerleader for them to go and do it and make sure that they were recognised for it as well.
So you've mentioned questioning a couple of times there, and I'm just curious by that. And again, knowing your kind of coaching background, is there a set kind of default model or structure that you use or set of questions that you would advise are the things to kind of get to that stage where you've got teams engaged with you?
I think formally, I love the GROW model. That's a very, it's easy. It's something that's quite recognised from many people. It's not very complex or cumbersome. So I would always.
The GROW model being the setting the goals. Is that right?
Yeah,
goals, reality, options, and then the way forward.
And options, and what are you going to do? So it was a magic. It's a magic combination of questions, and really it was quite a short, quick, okay, how are we going to do, let's go through this principle. And then as I got more comfortable with that principle after I'd done some training, I realised that I could very much dip into each element of the GROW model to get a quicker result. In and out, go back, okay, if that's not working, let's go back to, okay, is that the true goal? Is that all the options that you've kind of brought forward? Is there anything else that we can do? And it became a conversation. And I think to begin with, and I'll be brutally honest, to begin with, I think they were a bit like, oh, Lisa, stop it. We know what's coming. It was like, we know what you're going to say now. But then it became the team joke, essentially. It was Lisa's going to question us again. Lisa's going to coach us again. But like I said, towards the end of kind of a cycle of that, they started doing it for me. They were the ones that did that themselves. And I love, for me, it's the goal. It's where do people want to be? Is that an individual goal or is that a team goal? Is that going to be impactful? What's the impact of that? Uh, and it's that dreaming phase. It's about getting people to use that creative side. Okay, well, what? Let's dream about it. Okay, well, once we've dreamed about it, let's design it. We'll develop it. Let's see what happens. And if you're not allowing people to have that growth mindset, which is a really big buzzword at the minute, you've got to tap into that creativity within people. They've got to be able to use their imagination. Some people are naturally better at it than others, but the role as the leader and the coach, you've got to tap into how far they can take that creativity, how far they can dream, how far they can look at their goals. Some people are very short-term goal orientated and can, right, I need to just do this and then I can move on. And I think that I've noticed that in certain colleagues and been able to anticipate what works for them. Our lovely Gen Zedder, she can look 10 years in the future and she can dream it, and she'd have a mood board and she would manifest them goals and could be really creative with it. Whereas my sort of older generation of team members were a little bit less creative in those aspects, but we're equally supportive of the rest of the team having bigger ideas and goals and would also support them.
And I think that's a really great point. Again, it's about knowing your people, isn't it? Knowing your team and recognizing that they all bring something to the party or the conversation, but they all are slightly different in terms of how they do that and go about it. So I think that's a really good observation. And again, good to hear you talking about the grow model there. Other people will be aware of other models and frameworks. And for me, they all do different things. But fundamentally, having that kind of structured approach to the kind of coaching is great for getting that repetition, getting that consistency, getting that kind of continuity, if you like, in terms of the process of getting people to an end goal and embedding it, which is the key thing that you've talked about as well. I guess one of the things that I'm curious to understand is, having got your team to that level of performing and being proactive themselves and effectively being that high-performing team, how do you sustain that then? How do you maintain that level of high performance? Is that realistic to expect that that's achievable?
Oh, okay. I left that team. I don't manage that particular team anymore. And the team has changed quite significantly since the management of that team. And the team doesn't perform in the same way. The team has lost the psychological safe space. They have lost trust, and it's with the introduction of new team members as well. You almost have to restart again. You have to start the process again, because there's a significant change. We've had significant leadership changes. The team, wider team, has had goal changes, so there's a big shift. And I think that stability is really important to maintain that. And I think once you're into sort of maintaining mode, it's brilliant. You know, you just stick to what you know. But I think there is a lot to be said about the leader of that team being very, very important to keep those core principles together, to keep people on that trajectory of curiosity, growth mindset, trust, communication. It has to keep evolving. It has to keep happening. It doesn't just, tick, it's done. And I think that sometimes leaders will go, yeah, we've got really good scores on our surveys and everything's great, and they kind of let the ball drop, whichever one of those. Cut. So I think that leaders do have a really big responsibility in that, and that's how you maintain that high performing team.
I think, again, you'll know from the industry that you work in and the employer that you work with at the moment, it's all about continuous improvement, isn't it? That's a buzzword that I see in a lot of organizations as well. So again, when that team gets that kind of high level of performance, it's not a case of resting on your laurels and kind of tick, we've done that now. It is requiring the leader to continually push and to continually get the team to think, okay, well, what else can we do to kind of strive to be even better? And you're right, change happens all the time. So dynamics of teams change, either the work that they're doing, the location, the kind of people within the team, as you quite rightly say. But to get to that level of continuity and sustained high performance is really, really quite difficult. And it needs, as you say, that kind of constant continuous improvement mindset as well, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it takes time. It's habitual. It's almost that being the standard, not just in your team, but in the organisation. So we want to develop these people that we're working with and for. And, if we can develop them to become coaches of their smaller teams, and if then we move on, then there's already a foundation there for success beyond people leaving the team or any changes that happen. You're instilling a set, I'll say it again, like a habit. It's almost a given that we develop everybody to have these skills, these coaching core skills, these mindsets, these mind frames, these principles. That should be our Bible almost. And it's unfortunately not. We do miss that trick in kind of looking after our successors within those teams.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on with that. Again, it's that developing of them to kind of keep the baton moving, as it were, going forward with that kind of mindset. Lisa, that's been fantastic in terms of some of the key things that you talked about there. If we've got any leaders listening that are facing this situation with their team at the moment, how do they kind of coach and develop their team for better performance? What would be your final takeaway? What would be your kind of your one good piece of advice for that leader listening in to what they should be doing? What's the key things, do you think?
Okay, the key things for me, as by Lisa, I would dedicate time to communicate with the team and get to know them. I think that tells you everything. You need to really set aside those KPIs, set aside those annual target reviews and all of that stuff that isn't going to go away, and focus on your people. Focus on the people they are, what makes them tick, what's going to make them flourish, what's their uniqueness that you need to specialize in, and take the time to get to know them, because that's unlocking what happens next.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Is that enough? I could have gone on, but...
No, that's some great words of wisdom there. And again, hopefully those listening in will kind of benefit from that insight. Lisa-Sian, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hope to see you on future podcasts as well. But for the time being, thanks very much for your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.